it is not discrimination, then you're going to have to do some outside resource to find examples of where mass incarceration of black people is not discrimination. Because clearly in this article, it's pretty much filled with examples of how it is discrimination. So if you're going to take the position that it's not, you have to do something else. You have to go to another.
If we take the position that it is, can we still use outside sources?
Oh yeah, of course. You're going to need to use outside sources. Okay. Yep. All right. So then, whatever position you take, you're going to have to come up. Right. You're going to first of all summarize her 3 points. Try to come up with her three main ideas of why mass incarceration is discrimination. There's much more than 3, but you just need to find 3. And the 3 that are important to you. Right? Then, if you're taking the position that it's not discrimination, you have to find 3 reasons why it's not discrimination. You can also argue that it is discrimination, in which case here you would say, according to Alexander, mass incarceration of African Americans is discrimination. And then you have to find somebody else, another author, and X supports this position as well, right? And then whoever X is, you'd have to have 3 examples from X. Is that making sense to you? Right, you have 3 examples, right? So you'd have to, like, say for example, I'm trying to think of another, like, let me see if I can find an example online. Oh yeah, here it is. So, like for example, there's a magazine called The Atlantic, as in like the ocean. And a few years ago, they made this video here. Hold on, let's let this warm up. As soon as that warms up. Okay, so this is from The Atlantic. It's a magazine. It analyzes politics and culture. And this is one of their videos about mass incarceration. Make sure that the volume is going to work.
Oh boy. Oh boy.
Discover the new language of travel. Marriott Bonvoy. 30 hotel brands, endless experiences, rewards, reimagined.
Mass incarceration means that we've got a very high rate of incarceration, historically, comparatively. And the other thing is the rate of incarceration is so high, so socially concentrated, that we're no longer incarcerating the individual, but we're incarcerating whole social groups. The rate of incarceration now is about 5 times higher than it was historically. Historically, it was 100 per 100,000. Now it's about 500 per 100,000. If we look at prison, if we add jail to that, it's about 700 per 100,000. Nowhere in the world incarcerates as much as we do. We've seen extremely high rates of exposure to the criminal justice system for African American men with very low levels of schooling. So if we think about black men who were born in the late 1970s and who were growing up through the American prison boom of the 1980s and the 1990s, the chances that they're going to serve time in state or federal prison if they dropped out of high school is about 70%. So going to prison for that group of black men with very low levels of schooling, that's become a normal life event. And that's really only happened in the last 10 years. We're at this point now where there's about 1.2 million African American children with a parent who's incarcerated. That's about 1 in 9. The research shows that kids who experience parental incarceration have diminished school achievement, they have behavioural problems, depressive symptoms, acting out. And there's also evidence that these kinds of negative effects associated with parental incarceration are concentrated more among boys than among girls. And there's a very real risk here that incarceration becomes an inherited trait. The underlying issue is we've chosen prison as a way to respond to that problem of crime. And there are a whole variety of ways that we could have chosen to respond to that problem of crime. We've chosen the response of the deprivation of liberty. And we've chosen the response of the deprivation of liberty for a historically aggrieved group whose liberty in the United States was never firmly established to begin with.
So that's one. So that would be like one outside source.
What did the magazine say? The Atlantic, the family that what?
Let's see, let me go back at the end there, hold on.
Ignition sequence start.
You don't have to go back. It's okay.
Yeah, it was
3, 2,
called,
1.
you can look at it, it's called Mass Incarceration Visualized.
Okay.
Ignition.
Then you can do The Enduring Myth of Black Criminality in an animated interview with Ta-Nehisi Coates. This is the same issue, but just a different video. So this would be sources that you can use.
One point.
Oh boy.
I do feel like they prey on uneducated people. Did you see that on Netflix? Did you watch What is that?
Discover the new language of travel. Marriott Bonvoy, 30 hotel brands, endless experiences, rewards, reimagined.
Did you see the second season? No, I didn't.
I think our criminal justice system is working as intended. It is only broken to the extent that our society is broken. If your intention is to, jail massive numbers of people, if you believe that prison is an effective means of dealing with the myriad social needs of the African American community, then it is pretty effective. In fact, there's a long history in this country of dealing with problems in the African American community through criminal justice system, criminalizing social problems in a way that we don't do in other communities. For instance, if you looked at the research, you would find that somewhere around 60 to 70% of the people in prisons and in jails are suffering some sort of mental health problem. Upwards of 50%, going there dealing with some sort of chemical dependency. Viewed from another lens, these are public health problems. One could look at the massive number of African American men who are out of work and the intersection between that and prison. Or one could look at where prisons are located. And you would find that a lot of times prisons are located in rural regions, where all other industries effectively shut down.
Right, see I talked about the for-profit prison industry a few minutes ago, right? Right, for-profit prisons, right? This is how much they make, a lot of money. Where is that? Right, the revenue they get, right? They get $1.65 billion from the federal government. They spend $21.3 million giving money to senators and to federal people to keep the industry profit, to keep the for-profit private industry. And then the average CEO of a for-profit prison makes $3.7 million a year. That's our money that's going to him or her. It's a big business.
And you might think of that as actually an employment problem, not a criminal justice problem. The enduring view of African Americans in this country is as a race of people who are prone to criminality. I mean, literally, we have the notion of black people as, criminals written into our Constitution. We have a fugitive slave clause, which effectively makes all the things that are normal for any other American in that period illegal for black people, to pursue your own freedom was illegal. Slavery, was enforced by the criminal justice system, the slave laws. It made, very, very ordinary things like learning to read effectively a criminal act. Frederick Douglass is an escaped slave. He's a criminal. He's stolen his body, as he says in one of his speeches. Harriet Tubman, is running a massive criminal conspiracy, stealing people. I know we all love Martin Luther King today, but in his time, by the highest powers in the American justice system, Martin Luther King was viewed as a criminal by J. Edgar Hoover. Arguably, perhaps by the Kennedy administration and the Johnson administration. I say that because they signed off on the bugging, of his home and wherever he was. The lens of criminal justice is the way this country has traditionally regarded black people. I don't know that anything is broken at all. The deeper question is, are we okay with something on the order of 4,000 African American males, 400,000 being in jail? Are we okay with that? Are we okay with there being a 1 in 3 chance for every African American born in this generation of eventually doing some sort of time in prison and in jail? Are we all right with that? And that goes to the deeper question of, are we all right with black people in the position that they are in our society? Or do we have some sort of long-term commitment to justice?
This is from the Atlantic, September 15th, 2015. Right. So this video, these two videos would,
Full point.
these two videos would tend to support,
Full point.
these two videos would tend to support her position that mass incarceration is a form of discrimination. Now, if you wanted the article of that, you could go down here. Oh, did it go off?
No, it's tilted. It's angled
Okay.
down.
Okay, that's fine. It doesn't have to be perfect.
Okay.
Right. Now, if you wanted to read this entire article, you would just just type in the Atlantic mass incarceration and the age of mass incarceration in the Atlantic, and then you can just click on it here, and you will get the free article. Has anyone seen? This is just an interesting connection. Has anyone seen the movie The Black Panther? The man who was speaking in these previous two videos, Ta-Nehisi Coates, he's the writer of the Black Panther comic books and the movie.
What?
Right. So if you read, if you want to read, he wrote the Black Panther, but this is his article,
The Age of Mass.
The Black Family in the Age of Mass Incarceration. Right. And it's completely free. You can pick it up online, and that would go towards proving Alexander's point that mass incarceration of black people is a form of discrimination. So I actually think, honestly, I think that mass incarceration is a form of discrimination. I mean, I think it's pretty easy to prove that. I think it's going to be hard to prove that it is not a form of mass incarceration. So if I were you and I were doing number 2, I would just say mass incarceration is a form of discrimination. It's going to be quite easy to prove. It's going to be quite hard to prove the opposite, because there's overwhelming amount of information on the internet. Remember, it took me 2 seconds to find these things, right? Right. If you want to find mass incarceration is not a form of discrimination, I think you'd have to look a lot harder.
Yeah, because it's going to be harder to prove something that's, open eyes, something that's so out to the public, clear to see.
Right. Well, it's clear for us because we've read this, right? And because and years ago I actually read this, and I actually taught this years ago. So it's kind of
But still, it's not
clear.
even if, for example, I speak for myself. Even if I didn't just see this and I don't know what's going on, for what we've lived, we know for a fact that African American people have been targeted more than any other ones, or even us, the Hispanics, or you don't see, let's say in a problem, there's whites and there's black. They're always gonna go to the black, even if it was the whites. They go to a black person, then what? You know what I mean? So even if we didn't see this right now, that's something that's opened out to the public. That's something that you see no matter what.
right. Do you think everybody sees it, or do you think that just or do you think everybody sees it? I don't know. I don't know, did you?
Well, I think the ratios will not see it because, well, I mean hold on. No, yes, I don't think everyone
No,
sees
see,
it, but.
she doesn't, like, you don't see it?
No, I see that. I agree with you, but I think like some people who I work with who have different opinions, political opinions on things that I have, I think they would see the opposite way.
Right. I think that most white people have most white people, especially if they're if they're middle class or higher, right? That we have the privilege of not seeing that.
By
Right.
preference.
Yeah, well, you
By
don't, yeah,
preference,
you
by
don't see
preference.
it.
Yeah, right. We can be blind to it.
Mhm.
Yeah, we can be blind to it. So, yeah. So it's an interesting. It's an interesting perspective, right? Because it's hard to say. I don't know whether I don't like for example me like I don't know whether or not I would even like for example if someone who was a Spanish speaker said to me, oh, there's discrimination against Hispanics in America or something like that, or Portuguese or Brazilian or whatever, I don't know whether or not I mean as a teacher in a community college I do see it and I hear about it all the time, so I know it exists. But if it were just me and I was in my nice little Honda zipping back and forth to my business, to my job in Stanford, I don't know whether or not I would see it.
It's not something you worry about, yeah, you don't see
Right.
it.
Well, I remember I didn't notice it, like, when I was, I think, in elementary school,
Mhm.
where I lived. I mean, it was just a lot of diversity,
Mhm.
and so you didn't really see it until, I don't know, maybe I got older and started noticing.
Mhm.
That's when you notice it because
Yeah.
even now, even on social media, you see how people upload videos of kids hugging and one's white, one's black, or of doing an act of kindness or whatever. They don't see that. You're not born into being racist. You know,
Right. But
you learn that as you go, as
Yes.
you grow up.
That's for sure. Yeah. That's for sure. So let's go back to the structure of the essay again. Okay. So we've got a brief summary of the Alexander article, then the student writer's position, and then you're gonna have to come up with right? Then you're gonna have to come up with main point number one that supports your position, that supports the writer's position. Main point number one that supports the student writer's position. Right. Then you would come up with main point number two that supports the student writer's position. Then you could always throw in a counter argument. To the student writer's position. And then you're going to refute the counter argument. So it's going to be 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. In the 8th paragraph, it's going to be main point number 3 that supports the student writer's position, and then you'll have your paragraph 9, your conclusion. Now, one thing that you probably realize by now is that you're going to need to do a lot of reading. I know, not a lot of reading, but some outside research. Okay.
And do you want that in there, or is this something we're just gonna use?
No, this is for Sunday. This is for Sundays.
Yeah.
Yep.
Do you want the outside research
Yes.
in
Oh,
there
absolutely.
as well?
Yes. Oh, absolutely. Yes. Yep. We haven't talked about that yet, but yes, I will need that. What I was gonna do is the first draft, I didn't wanna stress people out with a works cited page.
Okay, so we don't need it for the
The first
one
draft,
that's on.
right, right,
Okay.
but for the later drafts, we will have a works cited page, yep. I just didn't wanna stress people out. But keep your research, keep all your notes for your research, because you will need it,
Okay.
yep. I just didn't wanna stress people out. What's that? You can't, it's something I did, or
No,
something?
no,
Oh,
she just asked me a question.
oh, okay. And again, I'm gonna post this all to the Blackboard. I'll have to figure out, it won't be tonight, it'll be like tomorrow afternoon or whatever, because I'm gonna have to make a movie or figure out how to best put this up there, because I think it's gonna be very heavy. Very heavy, yeah.
Your
'cause it's-
storage must be 256 because 2-hour-long videos.
Yeah, it's gonna suck up my video. I'm gonna transfer it to Google Drive, you know. Yes,
Do we have a limited or max number of sources to support,
yeah, she just asked that, yeah, so you will need that eventually. Not for-
whether we have limited amount of?
Oh, limited amount, no, there's no limited amount, but remember, this is like, how many words did I say this was, about 800 words or so?
Yeah.
Yep, so you don't have to go crazy with it.
And
you
this
know.
will be submitted in Blackboard.
This is everything, yep, this is all Blackboard, yep, the first draft is Blackboard, and then, after vacation, we'll be doing the second draft. Yep. Yep. But there's no limit to the sources at all, but just you remember, you don't want to exceed, 800 words is, well, it's not a lot, but it's for the first draft, that's kind of where we're at. When we do the second draft, when we do the revisions, then we'll eventually expand it out to 1,000, right? So it's eventually probably going to end up to be like 1,000 or 1,200 words. But for your first draft, I just want you to get your ideas in place.
It sounds like a lot, but hopefully if we have our point.
Yeah, if you do your research, yep. Right, like during vacation, I'm gonna have you be doing research for this. You're gonna be doing research for it during vacation time.
So what
Spring
kind of
break.
vacation is that?
Not coming to class vacation.
Oh,
Right.
you're too.
Yeah, I think I don't know, I think spring break is not necessarily a benefit to,
I feel like it came really fast.
Yeah.
Time just went by
Really
really fast.
Spring break.
yes. All right, so let's
I
go
think
back
it's
to here.
because it's only a Tuesday, Thursday class kind of thing. If it would have been an everyday thing, we'll still be praying for it to be faster.
Okay, so now within here, all right. Now within here, within these paragraphs here, you still have to come up with the causes and the effects of mass incarceration. What are the causes of it, right? We still have to identify causes and effects. Okay? So, can I erase this one more time? Can I erase it? Yeah, okay. Remember, we're recording everybody, so all the extra conversations will probably get picked up. And broadcast out to everybody when I put it on the internet, when I put it on Blackboard, so just be careful of cross conversations. All right, so now, based upon what you've read in the Alexander article and what we saw on the two videos that I just showed, what are some causes and effects of mass incarceration? Right? What are some causes and effects of mass incarceration? Right? Well, what's the first big one? Drugs, right? Drugs. Right, drugs. I'll put that as number 2. What's the first one? According to Alex, color. Yeah, race. Race. Color. Right. That's it. Right. Yep. Income. There you go. Now, when we were looking at the first option, we had distinct effects, right? We had distinct effects, right? You know, like was it lack of social opportunity, lack of, don't learn the language. Remember those things there, right? We almost had like a one-to-one correspondence. But now in this case here, regardless of the causes, there's really just one. All the effects are going to be connected to all these causes, right? What are the effects of mass incarceration in the black community, right? Right? He said like millions of black men and women come from, right, broken homes, right?
1 in 9 children have a parent or incarcerated.
Right. That's right. 1 out of 9 children have at least one incarcerated parent, right? Right? And it's also a right of inheritance, right? It's almost passed down generation to generation. Generation after generation within the same family often are incarcerated.
You said it would be in our counter
Argument.
thank you, that we would list any positive effects.
Right. Could there be any positive effects of mass
If we
incarceration?
don't feel like that, we don't necessarily have, but then it wouldn't be a counter.
Well, there might be some the counter argument would be is that it's not racism, that it's not systematized, that it's just by accident, right? But it's almost hard to have a counter argument to this. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. You may not need a counter argument.
Okay.
Yep. Now, no. Remember, I gave you the 2 options at the beginning. Yep. Yeah, sometimes you just can't counter argue it, right? Something along the lines of like whether someone's a good singer or a good president or a good something, you can counter argue that. But this is pretty much, these are facts that are hard to dispute, right? Now, we're picking up and we're saying that these 3 things are the causes of mass incarceration, right? But really, we could actually go back further. And what is actually the root cause? This is kind of somewhere in the middle, right? This is in the middle of causes. What is actually the cause before the cause?
The government.
The government, good, okay. Government, and if you want to go back before that, what else was the cause? Slavery, yeah. Slavery, right? Even the U.S. Constitution. Right? Even the U.S. Constitution, right, said that slavery is okay, right? Actually codified or made slavery a law. Right? So it actually, if you want to trace the historical causes of mass incarceration, it actually starts way back here in 1787 when they first started writing the Constitution. We're talking 300 years. Well, 300 years, 230 something years of systematized discrimination against black people. Right? It's nice to it's not, right, for our purposes, for our essay. Yeah, we can start back here, in the 20th century, and say that these all things happened in the 20th century. But really, it really goes back all the way to 1787. And if you really want to think about it, it goes all the way back to Columbus, because Columbus and his group were the ones who brought the first slaves over, right? So it actually goes back to 1492. Right? So you think of, when you're really thinking about when did all this begin? It began in 1492 when Columbus discovered America, right? He enslaved the Taínos in Puerto Rico and in Dominican Republic and Haiti, right? He enslaved them, right? And then that's when then when they all died off, right? The Europeans were like, oh, we need more slaves. So they went to Africa. Right? So we're talking 500 years of causes that led us to here, right? And of course it was the governments. It was the British government, the French government, the Portuguese government, the Spanish government, the European governments, all those people that were involved in the slave trade and allowed the slaves to be brought to the Americas. Right? When did Britain, not the United States, when did Britain end slavery in their territories? Right? Britain ended slavery in their territories in 1833. So all the Caribbean islands that were owned by Britain, they ended slavery in 1833. When did slavery end in America?
Oh, I'm sorry.
1861. But still though, by 1861 it was already 400 years, right? So, so this has been a system for 500 years. We can say that, we're living now, so we can, right? So we can look back and we can say, okay, yeah, it's in the 20th century. But really the causes were, back to Columbus. The root causes. Little history lesson in the middle of writing. But it gives you perspective on it, right? I think 500 years, right? Okay. All right, so those are the causes and effects. You've got those, right? You can do some more research, right? I'll post the links to our to Blackboard, so that gives you guys some more help. Any questions on either option 1 or option 2? Just out of curiosity, how many of you feel better about this essay now? Feel better? A few people feel better. Okay.
I can actually write.
Okay. Right.
I was just
Right. Right. So you gotta remember, right? Like the essay that's due on Sunday is a first draft, right? It's worth 100 points. I mean, it's worth a full grade, but you're going to be writing this in stages. You're going to do this one now on Sunday, right? And then you're going to let it sit for a little while, right? You're going to let it sit for a week. Next week we're going to work on some writing skills, and we're going to work on how to revise that essay. All right, and then over spring break you'll have time to do some reading to get more information. When we come back from spring break, you'll do your second draft. Right? Because what we're going to do is we're going to space it out so that way there it has time to sit in your mind. What'll happen is that when you write on Sunday, you're going to write it, you'll put it right, you're going to give it to me, we're going to do some pair work with it for next week. I'll explain that as we get closer to that. But then you're going to let it sit in your brain for a little while. And by letting it sit in your brain, you're actually going to be able to contemplate it or understand it better when we pick it back up again after spring break. Is that making sense to everybody? Good. Okay, cool. All right. Any questions? Any questions? Can I write your paper for you?
Yeah.
Is it, if I didn't get to finish reading the last chapter, is it necessary to I don't want to overwhelm my brain anymore. I kind of want to focus on this one.
Right. Well, I would say that everything that all of
for
the
right
hill.
now.
Right. I would say that hillbilly, elegy, minority, student clubs, segregation and integration, all those things do float back to, are connected back to either option 1 or option 2. So if you can read them before you write, that would be better. But if you can't, If you can't,
Well, I read those two.
oh, okay.
I just didn't read the last one.
Right, then,
For right now.
for right now, you're okay. You're okay. Right, but if you just only read those two articles, it's not gonna be enough. You should at least try to read at least minorities, the new Jim Crow, minority student clubs, segregation or integration, because that would go with option one, right? And why rural America voted for Trump? Maybe not. You may not be okay with that. Everybody all right? Questions? Okay, cool. Chris, you can turn the power off on that.
No, I can leave it. That's a lot.
Hopefully I have some battery left so I can get home. Yeah. Yeah. No, you can watch the video. That's the whole point of it, right? Right, that's why I did that. Okay, cool.